Welcome to a video about the Subcontract Management Institute, or ScMI as we call it. My name is Dan Jacobs. I'm the founder and chairman of the Institute. This video was filmed at the National Contract Management Association Contract Management Symposium in Washington, D.C. in December 2015. It begins with activities in the exhibit hall at the ScMI booth. ScMI officers participating include Lynn Vincent, Vic Avetizian, Tom Reed, Al Boykin, and myself. It transitions and concludes with a presentation by a panel of ScMI officers and trustees and a conference breakout session addressing subcontract management best practices. Panelists include Lynn Vincent, a founder and vice chairman, is the moderator, and panelists include ScMI President Tom Reed, ScMI Trustee Rob Burton, and myself. The purpose of the Subcontract Management Institute, a nonprofit 501c3, is to establish and maintain the global standard for subcontract management administration to include the Subcontract Management Body of Knowledge, SYMBOK. It provides the contractor with knowledge, skills, competency, tools, and techniques to execute subcontracts more effectively, reduce performance risk, and deliver value to the company's shareholders and taxpayers. And it provides organizations and individuals the opportunity to become certified to enhance productivity, profitability, and their value proposition. ScMI provides prime and subcontractor personnel with the knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to deliver best value supplies, services, and data, and reduce performance risk in the execution of publicly funded contracts.
So what we did is we've actually developed a certification program, both for individuals as well as organizations. We've established a body of knowledge. What we found was there's no worldwide standard for subcontract management. So we've established a body of knowledge to create training programs for subcontract management. So let me just, our objectives, of course, is to help you increase your knowledge. We learn something every time we get in front of people and we get questions asked. And also talk about, teaming, how to do that a little better than maybe we're doing it today. So we're going to talk about a lot of aspects of subcontract management. And I've kind of alluded to why we think this is so important. I mean, all the way back to, we've had, I don't know how many, even in my career, we've had in terms of looks at the procurement process, acquisition reform, it goes on and on and on. But I tell you, I don't know, I bet you there haven't been a handful of discussions in these reports that talk about subcontract management and the importance of that. And we really believe, and I hope that you do, that is an issue, and we're going to try to help improve that. So, here's my chart. You can see, the tip of the iceberg, and that's kind of where we focus. Billion-dollar programs, whether they're hardware, software, you name it. We have this contract established through, a process that can normally long, sometimes, and for some of you, arduous, but it's established. And then before that, of course, most of the primes have got their subs that they use over and over and over again. That's good because there's consistency. Then there's another value chain under that that's in this supply chain area that's down here. And all the time there's the flow down, the legalities, the communication or lack thereof that has to take place all through here. And the farther down that you get from that top and that prime, certainly the less visibility that your main customer, the government, has of what's going on under here. And I can tell you as a Navy guy and a Navy supply guy, I chased a lot of parts to help repair ships that were coming out of this supply chain way down under the surface, that the expectation when the contract was awarded to the prime was going to occur. and didn't. And so I was, on that phone, honestly, whether I had privity or not to the chagrin of the prime, I found out what the problem was and tried to get what I thought my ship and the Navy needed. There's a lot of perspectives. I just wanted to highlight at least three. From the prime, these primes, by the way, and you heard that over and over today, are global today. Boeing, for example, I was surprised that, we used to think of Boeing being 50% commercial, 50% government, and now it's about 60 or 70% what they call commercial, which I think is part of this worldwide global market that they have. And 30% or so was really government. That was a little bit of a surprise to me, but you see, these primes, all of them, are going global today, and there's issues associated with language, laws in different countries begin to flow down. A lot of things are happening in this world today, in this area. The subs, they look up, they get to, the direction, they want to please their prime, they want to, stay engaged, they want to have the next contract be part of that, and it goes on and on. But you get down into the supply chain of this, what under my subcategory here, it's all down like this, and some of them feel like, the whole world is falling on them. I've got to do this, I've got to report over and over. But then again, there's a lack of communication and visibility, and we'll talk about some about that. And from the government, they want results. They want the cheese. They bought the cheese. They want it delivered on time. They want it, they want not only it to smell right, they want it to taste good.
Welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here at another ScMI event, be able to present and meet with you and talk with you. My name is Tom Reed. I am the president of the ScMI. I operate my own consulting firm in Denver, Colorado, as we all do from different parts of the country. And we formed ScMI to handle matters related to publicly funded contracts. And so many of us have this focus that this is, well, that's federal government. Yes, that's part of federal government, is part of our focus, but publicly funded contracts include state and local. It includes international. Anytime you begin dealing with the public funding of the prime contract, the rules change. Things are different. And you have to be careful that the right rules are being applied to your contracts. Because many people become surprised in the process of having negotiated a great contract, and now they discover it's not what they thought it was. For an example, how many of you have done business with a company based in another country? Most of us. Good. You're going to say, well, this is so simple. This is, yeah, it is. There's nothing complex here. But too often we've come up into the contracting ranks. We've developed our contracting expertise without any appreciation for what are known as the project management skills. There's a project management institute out there as well. They have their own body of knowledge. They have their own processes, their own certification. They are excellent disciplines. And yet so often we don't use them. If you are going to perform your prime contract well, you want to make sure you know what the scope is. Because after all, the government is so good at defining the scope so meticulously for you.
When did that start?
Yeah, exactly. and I don't mean to disparage our government folks, because the contracting folks often don't even get to vote on that, even though they should. And so the point is, unless you put your own bounds around the scope, and you do this by creating a work breakdown structure, you don't even know what it is. I wrote 2 articles for Contract Management Magazine a year or so ago, and I said there are the 2 most important questions you need to ask in any contract. And I love to do this. I'd go up to contracting officers and I ask them these 2 questions. And I always had to laugh because I always got met with a deer in the headlights look. Because the first question I ask is, what is the contract? Well, of course you know what the contract is. Really? Do you know what's in Section J? What's Section J? The attachments. Did you read them all? You know what they say? Are they part of your compliance matrix? I got a couple of yeses, but I got a whole lot of people going this and a lot of people going, and that's my point. So often, we don't do a good enough job up front to even know what the contract is. What's in, what's out. Have you ever gotten a contract, big prime, maybe a large sub as well, and they all use standard boilerplate terms and conditions, right? We had one time with a client, there were 7 different inspection and acceptance clauses in it. They didn't want to negotiate the terms and conditions because they're standard, we all use them, right? You got to know what the contract is. Work breakdown structure. You should be doing that on your prime. You should also do that with your subs. And in fact, if you've done a good job at the prime level, it's relatively easy to carve out those sections that are allocated to the subs. And there's no magic to the way you structure a WBS. One way to do it is to structure it in line with the subcontracts that are performing under you. About this. As Len said, we truly care about this. We've cared deeply about subcontracts and subcontract management for a long time. And having failed to get anybody else to step up and take notice, we said, you know what? We can do this.
And so the only thing I really want you to remember out of my presentation is you don't want to flow all the clauses down to subcontractors. You, the prime contractors, and also the government should be encouraging the reduction of the number of clauses being flowed down to subcontractors. So now I'm in a law firm in Washington. I can't tell you how, I swear, it's all the time. I see these subcontracts. I see virtually every FAR clause flow down to the subcontractors. Now why? Why are prime contractors doing that? Number one, it's easy. It's easy. And you don't want to forget one, right, that you have to flow down. So let's talk about that. You know how many FAR clauses there are, and you know how many are flowed down to subcontractors. I mean, it can be dozens and dozens. Simple as that. But the bottom line is there are only 10 FAR clauses that potentially have to be flowed down to subcontractors. I mean, not many. And I'm being somewhat liberal because you probably are not going to even flow all of those down. So what are they? You know, what are they that the federal government thinks is so important that they have to be flowed down to subcontractors? EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity. This is obviously very important to the federal government. This is a very important social policy which the federal government wants flowed down to subcontractors. So you will see those clauses. There's several of them. Out of the 10, 4 or 5 are dealing with EEO. It's sort of interesting. And then you say, well, what if I do forget to put it into the subcontract? Believe it or not, it used to be, so what? You know, you forgot, it's not there, boom. There's something called the Christian doctrine, which generally does not apply to subcontractors. And subcontractors and prime contractors feel very good about the fact that, hey, you know, if I forget, and it doesn't flow down. Well, guess what? In 2013, a federal court here in DC, with respect to the EEO clauses, because they're such an important social public policy, said in fact that even though the prime forgot to put in the mandatory FAR clause, the court read it in through the Christian doctrine, actually read it into the contract at the subcontract level. Highly unusual, but I think that with respect to these mandatory clauses, you subcontractors need to be aware of the fact that even if the prime forgot to flow down, and the prime should feel good too. Hey, you know, it's very possible if I screw up, the government's not going to be terribly upset because maybe in fact it will flow down to the subcontractor level. So just a warning that the Christian doctrine is arguably alive and well at the subcontract level, even though generally speaking it never has applied. 2013, things are changing. So with that court case, subcontractors just need to be aware these mandatory clauses may flow down. So what else we have that's so important that has to be flowed down? So ethics, that's another strong public policy. Mandatory disclosure, another very strong public policy. That clause with respect to subcontractors having to have a business ethics program, having the mandatory disclosure rules flow down to the subcontractor level, that is a mandatory flow down provision to subcontractors. The mandatory disclosure is very important to the government. They want contractors to report potential fraud, and you can understand why that is exceptionally important. Tom, with respect to the FAR Part 12, you know, you go back to FASA, you go back to the Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act of 1994. One of the big themes there was let's use commercial practices. Prime contractors are required by the FAR to use commercial contracting methods and to try to purchase commercial items and services to the greatest extent possible from their subcontractors. So that is the big theme, and with that comes the idea of simplicity, the idea of streamlining. With that comes the idea of knocking off all of these flow downs to the subcontract level. I'm very excited about legislation that just passed the Senate right before Thanksgiving, which is it's called the Program Management Improvement and Accountability Act of 2015. I really am hoping to see it passed in the House in 2016, because the bottom line is it is going to force more accountability on federal agencies for improving program management in the federal government. I'm not going to go into all the specifics of the law, but be on the outlook for that law in 2016. I do think with its passage, there'll be more emphasis even on subcontract management. Once we get more emphasis on program management at the prime level, I think it's inevitable that that's going to filter down to the subcontract management level as well. And so I'm very optimistic that Congress now at least is seeing the importance of it, and the challenge in 2016 will be making sure that all the federal agencies take on more responsibility and accountability for improving program management as well as subcontract management.
Can you repeat the name of the act that you just referenced regarding the program management and accountability?
It's called the Program Management Improvement and Accountability Act of 2015. The Senate bill was S-1550, which was passed. There's a companion House bill, 2144, which is now with the oversight of the Government Reform Committee on the House side for consideration. Obviously, it's not going to pass in the next couple of weeks, but hopefully sometime in 2016. And I think it really is not many people know about it. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but in my view, it's some of the most important acquisition reform legislation we've seen. It is acquisition because program management is part of acquisition. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned about using subcontractors that have public pricings, just GSA schedules. And one of the things we run into as a sub to certain primes is them asking for our GSA rates as a subcontractor, and then running into the issue with the auditor of the government being the most favored customer. And so what are your ideas about that and your approach? Our approach has been to not offer our GSA rates to primes because it is a commercial relationship as considered by the auditor, but I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that.
Well, are you doing a higher price? You're probably doing a higher price than...
Yes.
Well, that's all negotiable, isn't it? I mean, it's all negotiable. I'll tell you though, you're taking a risk with respect to your competitiveness, and so that's certainly something to think about. At the subcontractor level, sort of anything goes. But the reality of the situation is everybody's going to know what your pricing is on the public websites, and it's going to be. I think it's just going to put you at a competitive disadvantage.
In regards to the communication that you're talking about, I do believe that one of the reasons the prime don't let subs talk directly to the customer is the intimacy. I've been watching lots of contracts where intimacy. So the prime contractor is afraid, I would use the word, to let the sub talk directly to the prime so that they will build an intimate relationship that will affect the recompete or any kind of new business. So how to breach this kind of misconception of the communication between the sub and the customer, especially when it's, let's say, plus minus 50% of the work is doing by the major sub.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling the government's missing the boat on this, and I know it's somewhat, a new idea, but we are so ingrained to think we can't talk to the subs, and I don't think you can cut the prime out, but I don't see any reason if you're having a meeting why the subs can't be sitting there with the prime and they can hear the same thing from the government at the same time. That solves a lot of miscommunication problems. The biggest problem that we have, and it starts at the very beginning of the acquisition process, is the poorly defined requirements. Every legal issue that I've dealt with in my career, almost every legal issue I dealt with, I can trace it back to the requirements and the faulty, the unclear requirements. It is absolutely imperative, if you're going to start off with requirements that are unclear, to have very good communication throughout the entire process following that, in order to clarify those requirements. And subcontractors oftentimes are implementing requirements that the government doesn't want. And that is a real problem, which I think could be cured up front if there was better communication. It's somewhat very simplistic, but very hard for the government and the prime contractors to do.
In every single program that we've been called in that's having a problem, once we baseline where they are, we find that they did not have a communications plan, which is one of the 10 knowledge and skill areas in project management. Program managers fail to have a formal communication plan, and that includes how am I going to communicate with my customer and with my subs and have them communicate. I want to introduce a couple of other people that are here. That's a major part of what we're doing. The Vice President and CFO of the Contract Management Institute is Vic Abbatisi from Los Angeles. The Vice President and Chief Learning Officer is Al Boykin. So why don't you guys stand up and see who you are. We have a client was having some serious problems. We found out that business development was picking the subs. I said, well, what about your coordination with contracts? Well, we don't need to bother them. They were running that bear on. Operations had to skin it. That's where we are in too many organizations. So our purpose, literally in life, is to have a laser focus on subcontract management. We're going to make you start thinking more about it, period. So, quality assurance. The government has come up with something that absolutely works. Working with industry, it's called a Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan. There should be one for every single subcontractor you have. How do we monitor performance? 3 ways only. Inspection, meetings, and reports. There are 14 different inspection clauses in the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Which one is applicable to you? But one thing that's in common with all 14 of them is paragraph C. I'm paraphrasing, but it says the government can inspect anywhere, anytime, anyhow. But they cannot create any undue delay. How many of you had time and time again, government inspector or auditor shows up, hello. The government's required to have a quality assurance surveillance plan with every prime. It's a negotiated process. Stop and think about how many of you have, as a prime, a quality assurance surveillance plan that you negotiated with your customer. Now think about this. Do you have a quality assurance surveillance plan for every single sub you have? That's that focus. There's an old saw that what gets measured gets done. Can you believe in that? That's the same way with communications plan we were talking about, Al. If you don't have one, it's not going to get done. And one of the things you address is how are we going to make sure our customer communicates with our subs and they don't go outside the boundaries and so forth. That they don't cross the line in terms of Anti-Deficiency Act, things like that. Look, in all work there's a known and the unknown. What's the known? This, the contract. What's the unknown? Expectations. And too often, we're dealing in expectations at every single level. Now, Tom mentioned the WBS, the work breakdown structure. The sole purpose of the WBS is a decomposition of all work that must be done. It asks and answers one question. What must be done? Now, how do we track it? Because we number. Level 1 is the program or the contract. Level 2 are the primary requirements. Level 3, because we break each one of those primary requirements down. What are our risks? What's the critical path? By definition, those events that take the longest. And you know what takes the longest in most programs? Buying something. But then, of course, that's no problem. 6 months later, when you need it, it's, yeah, I forgot that one. I should have gotten that one. Yeah, we'll go out and order it now. What better documentation then have a quality assurance surveillance plan that says, here's what we negotiated to facilitate it. It's cost effective. And you've got a paper trail. What's the 3 most important words in government contracting? Document, document, document.